think you guys are around 8. I have the other friends who watched it as well. Pushing me to watch it too. It's so good.
Make me laugh.
I might go upstairs.
We can go to the canteen, or I can.
Idea is so good.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me show you the bathroom. And I'll show you my
Once it comes, we join.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow, you too. You're over the team here.
Yeah. Do you know the bell and Ray?
Yeah, I know. We met before, yeah.
Hannah and I used to work together at Mount Druitt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for many years.
Yes. Murad.
Yes, yeah.
And John.
Yes.
I was thinking of Murad today because his face came up in the Pulse newsletter.
Yeah, yes.
I was like, oh, Murad.
Yeah, yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's still there.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, there's some representation here.
It's good.
It's a very good spot for activities like this. Like, have you been here before?
Not this space.
Oh, yeah. I think it's new. Like, roughly, about 3-4 years. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mara. Oh, you have another one. Okay.
Presenter.
Oh, yeah.
I think people are like, answer questions, and I'm like, I'm sorry, keep going, don't go around me, like, please.
Where can I come? Do you have do you want to do this?
No, it'll ruin the look. So can we do it, still here? Sorry.
This is going to go in your chest like this.
Uh-huh.
And yet, can you put that at the back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Okay, great, thank you. And the PowerPoint?
And this, can I just show you?
Yes.
When you want to go, you can just click this way. It doesn't matter which script.
Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, yeah, I don't need a pointer, but I just want to test it.
Yeah, that's the video. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, keep going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got
And
it.
it's going to go back.
So, I can turn on the video when I want. Right?
Yeah. When you're ready to go next, to do
Fabulous. Did you get your chocolates?
Okay.
My sister
Just
was
to
in
get mine. Just to get the video and then out.
And then volunteers in.
Oh my gosh, I need to enjoy it. Tell me your fault and I'll take you. Give me no time.
You almost me.
Okay. Yes. I will welcome you again.
The Shahana said, I have 1,000 girls. Yeah, and I agree. I could have just something beyond that. God, I have another thing that's coming up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this fancy. You wanted to speak for international business, so I don't know how I function. Yes, totally. Yeah. Let me ask you the beauty meeting and then we'll see how I speak. Sometimes I go to that mental health thing. Hello, doctor. Wednesday. Well, I can come back. I'll come back. So I'll come back to you. So I will. We have the IC thing. I'll finish meeting with IC around 1:30. I'll come back to you. I will finish around 1:32. And then we can have some stuff. I'm nothing away. I dance after every movie. All this always do really? Yes. Time and stuff. Sarah, is this yours? Oh, that's mine. Okay. You haven't had lunch. Yeah. Your glucose levels right. How cute. Hi. I haven't got mine. Oh my goodness, this is like I'm very happy. I can totally understand. This is my go-to, my solution for everything. Thank you very much. Are you active here? How you guys? Oh, you're back online. Okay. You're getting mine. I'm not I know. My life, so I could have yeah, no, we have a connection. Yeah, we should. So I'm no, you are. No, forward. Welcome everyone, and thank you very, very much for coming. We have a privilege today to welcome Dr. Mara Adelman from the United States, who will be talking to us about communication with refugees and migrants who don't speak English very well and came from countries where they had a very traumatic experience. And it's very, very relevant to us in our district because I'm pretty sure you all know that 50% of our patients are people who live within West Virginia came from migrant or refugee backgrounds. And with American Southwest, we are the second largest area which takes refugees in Southwest. So it's very, very relevant. Owners and also acknowledge the people, the elders participated in Aboriginal care. Dr. Mara Adelman received her PhD from the University of Washington. She is the author of Beyond Language, Cross-Cultural Communication for ESS, English Second Language, and an award-winning ethnographic study of the second largest count of persons with AIDS, the special community. Her research and scholarship focuses on solitude, interpersonal and organizational social impact. Fact specialist at the Department of Communication at the University of Mekelle in northern Ethiopia, and a Fulbright specialist at the Department of English at Fudan University, Shanghai, China in 2007. In both programs, she developed culture-specific required courses in cross-cultural communication. Please put your hands together and welcome her.
It's an honor to be here. Oh my gosh. I was getting off the train and I had this amazing conversation. A woman from Egypt on the left and a woman from Poland on the right. It's just so much fun. And I thought about Napa, and Napa's beautiful. I mean, it's the wine country. You're all invited to come. I'll send you my email. No, seriously, my sisters and I, we built a compound. We call it the Home for the Unrest. We're the political center. You can imagine which side. And by the way, make a caveat as I start. Just want you to know that I obviously do not support my country's policies. And I could rant for a couple hours, but I will stop there. You don't want to get me going. Before I start, I want to mention that this is an abbreviated PowerPoint. I've also done a detailed PowerPoint for you with my notes and stuff. That will be sent to you, so don't worry about notes and stuff. Number two, you've got two handouts that will be sent forwarded to you because, you know, the printing and all that. One is about, from the United Nations, actually it was a really good article, it was rather in-depth. I just took their cheat sheet and sent that, but I think you might want to go to the full site. And there's another one that Ian, my colleague who brought me here, did on the language that we use to talk about refugees. That I thought was actually very good, and I'll take back to the States. I love all this cross-fertilization and stuff. So please know that that will be sent to you. And then there are a couple of references that some of you might be interested in this evening, this afternoon. One on the new work that's going on with trauma and meditation and breathing, and one on yoga. We call it movement. So my older sister, Tama, is at Samos and Lesbos now. She works 6 months out of the year with Hands On Global. It's a small NGO, grassroots. That's what we raise money for. She brings back the life jackets, and all those items back there, by the way, just a little plug, I'm shameless. I really am. I'm shameless for raising money. All made from refugee life jackets. But anyway, what was I? Just coming back. I'll move on. So I did want to make a qualifier here. You know, it's interesting. In the United States, you cannot get a faculty member to attend an event unless A, there's a free lunch, or B, a stipend. And here you all are, with neither. So I want to say thank you for coming. For most people, certainly in the United States, I think less here, but certainly in the United States, the refugees are invisible. I was invited here, and my mission is to make the invisible visible. I mean, talk, chat, start events, do a displaced dinner, whatever it takes. I'm very shameless, by the way, and I have to say this, because I'll be in a Safeway supermarket, you know, and I'll pick up a magazine, I'll say, I'll turn to the person behind me, I'll say, can you believe our obsession with Tom Cruise's sex life? Actually, I could, but anyway, when there are 70.8 refugees, it's amazing. Or, you know, somebody said, what's the SOS tag for? I'm glad you asked. You know, it's like, I really believe that people become invisible when we stop talking about them. I do believe, I had an epiphany that this is what happened in the United States regarding the Holocaust. We're so busy wondering whether we should brine the turkey for Thanksgiving or bake it, that we lose a certain global consciousness. And so when Ian, I did this program on Frayed Lives in Napa, it was sold out, and I sent it to him on Fluke. He's a Fulbrighter, and so am I, and he said, oh my God, he said, this is what I want to do. But what we didn't expect is that we're doing the program on Great Lives and Refugees in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. 3 major cities. Oh my goodness, I'll be lucky if I can get it into San Francisco. But when Tamara works in the camps, the refugees often ask her, please tell people about us. Don't let them forget us. I think one of the great fears is not just how they live, and there's obviously no future for them. Nobody wants them, as you well know. I mean, the island of Lesbos was built for 3,000 there. She just sent me a report this morning, 16,000. They're living in absolutely disgusting conditions. The children, there are over 300 minors who have no protection, who are sexually assaulted all the time, and there's nothing she could do. But their greater fear is that they simply are forgotten, at the world at large. So, let me be candid at the beginning. Sorry, I have incredible hay fever. I left the fires in Napa thinking, oh, I'm going to Australia, I can breathe. And I got off the plane and I was just weeping. And I didn't want to take a Zyrtec because then I'd fall asleep in a New York second. So I'm sorry if I'm a little weak. It's so much I do not work with refugees. And I was asked to give this talk, and I only usually talk in my areas of expertise, although I have an expertise in cross-cultural communication. My PhD is on social support. There's some little there. But I became nervous. And then I said, the ethnographer in me kicked in, and I started interviewing people who work with refugees. Okay? I started doing my library and internet research like I would any research project, and I cherry-picked for you this afternoon. And then I sent my PowerPoint to people working with their refugees and asked them, please give me feedback. So I hope you'll find today useful. My opinion is if you walk away with 1 or 2 ideas, I'm ecstatic, okay? And you will also, I believe in the collective wisdom of the group. You all bring a certain expertise. So today you'll have index cards and cards which I collect. I spent an hour and a half this morning compiling my last talk, and I will do yours as well with your comments about what you find effective and so forth, so that we draw upon the collective wisdom, or as my friend would say, the pool of ignorance, but hopefully the collective wisdom of the audience as we get your feedback to this topic. I want to stay focused. I will focus on the key issues. As I mentioned, the PowerPoint will be sent to you. And I also came to Australia to talk about the salon model. I really have a problem with the talking heads Q&A model. If in fact we really want to process information, we want to move people to change, especially behavioral change, or we want to even sign a petition or something, the Q&A is such a didactic one way, so trust me, you will all be engaged today. So let us begin. Are you sitting with people you don't know? Oh, good. Okay. Here's what I'd like to do is the next one? The one breath introduction. And if you could join this table, because and if you could just share, what is your name and what is your work with the refugees? That's it, one breath, shouldn't take very long, we don't have an autobiography here. And please share with people. And it's interesting, here I create almost every table, this is great. So if you could just take a minute to introduce yourselves.
Usually what happens is, I don't know how. They kind of okay, I'm doing
Okay, one breath, one breath. Three breaths. Four breaths back. Show you, I will set the context for today. This film that you're about to see, it's about 10 minutes, was just made by Hands On Global. And I'll yell out my sister when she shows up. I'm very proud of her. And it was filmed, it was just made. And so you can see the conditions. Maybe most of you know the conditions. I mean, we don't get these images in the United States, by the way. In fact, we get buckas in the United States. To use my Yiddish. We don't get hardly anything. And so I wanted you to see the context, especially when we start talking about, as many of you know, the residual trauma. These refugees are not in PTSD. There's no post about them. There's no post anything. They are in the trauma. And Tammy says a lot of PTSD doesn't apply. And, by the way, there's no mental health in this, anywhere in the camps. Are you ready for this? 16,000 people. I just need to say this. You'll see a sign that's one guy. And guess what? He's a microbiologist. So Tama and their crew really have to pick up a lot of the issues there. So anyway, it's my pleasure to start this film and share it with you. Lights down. Volume.
Wire in the olive grove there's limited electric, med heat, food and medical care were rationed, supplies always ran out. We started to see patients in their tents. This proved somewhat unsafe. We decided to rent a van of the road.
That's my sister.
And then another 2,000 people living outside the wire in the olive grove overflow camp. to see patients in your tents. This proved somewhat unsafe. We decided to rent a van out for road camping. Chairs on concrete benches and even the hood of the van. We saw an average of 60 to 75 persons a day. We saw a lot of untreated chronic diseases, injuries from torture and long imprisonment, sick children, and health issues related to this form. Good friends and promises to return. But return thanks to our donors who brought over 700 pounds of medications and clinic at the Moria camp. It was again really chaotic and very difficult working conditions. We brought a security person with us who monitored the gate and none of the less concentrate on the but for early in the morning to get enough work to be screening that day. Emergencies were seen in between. We did the best we could with what we had. We were planning to return to Moria when we got a call from our colleague, Adelman, on the show.
I am sending agents to hands on global, and I want to help them with their work. And I have enough time to Samos and they support the people who didn't in the camp, and at the same time to their continuous support them us with our project. Right now I am in the front of the camp in Samos, in Berlin, and the capacity of this camp they created to house 650 refugees, but today around 4,000, 400 people living in this camp. Most of them they live in the jungle. The condition here is really bad. We can also refugee for refugees in December 2018 as emergency. And when we came here and we saw the condition, I gave a call for Valerie, and she responded very fast, and they came to Samos. When they came last time, they support as much people they could, and now we are calling them again because both still alive, and we are asking them to come back here to Lesbos and Samos and continue doing their great work as they do in different countries in the world. In this camp, most of the people they live in small tents.
So here we are in Samos. There is only one doctor in the Greek camp for 6,000 refugees and one NGO medical. Operated the medical clinic and treated patients again from the back of the van. This time we brought a small shelter to work in. Triage was set up at a table, pharmacy in the back of the van, We set up our little shelter and did portable ultrasounds in there, and that was shared with massage. With multiple providers, we worked together and even saw patients under a tree. We saw close to 80 patients a day. Those needing more than basic care were referred to the medical clinic, which faced the same issues of extreme difficulty in getting lab work, x-rays, and referral to higher levels of care. As of September 2019, the population in Chamas is over 7,000, with most of them living in tents in the jungle.
For them to feel they are human. And this is what actually for government, not for us, our work trying to support them to take human life in different way. As I said, like giving them warm clothes, giving them food, or give them medicine. We're still waiting for you guys. We're still waiting for your support, and we will be here.
Who are these refugees? They are victims of war and persecution and environmental disaster. Nobody believes their Iraq and Afghanistan, merchant and teacher. Democratic Republic of Congo, to university professor, 1810.
Context, perhaps where people are coming. Before I begin, because I have an extensive PowerPoint and we're okay on time. You have index cards in front of you. I would like you to take a minute. You won't be able to process it now because we'll process at the end. To write one concern or issue that you have in communicating with refugees. I will take your cards. I will type these up within the next couple of days, and then we'll look at solutions. You just take a minute or so to write one concern. Hold on to your cards because we will use the back of them at the end. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to share because for me, the priority was for you to see this film. So let us move. Let me preview. Today I'm going to cover 3 areas: the linguistic or language, the use of interpreters, and some cultural issues. It's not a lot of time here, but look sharp and keep up. Okay, so the first thing Tamara said to me when I interviewed, by the way, my PowerPoint was sent to all those workers that you saw there, and they gave me the feedback. We have a new expression in my family. You have people come over to your home, and they talk endlessly about themselves. Do you know any of those people? They never ask you a question, they never mention anything about their home, I've had them for dinner. We have a new expression, AAM, all about me. It's like, I've got to be me, it's all about me. And then it reminds you that middle line, enough about me, what do you think about me? But Tana said, and this is one of the first things, she says, when we get frustrated when we're working with people, before we know it becomes all about me. Frustrated, and people are checking on themselves and so forth. And then they can't do that. She says, well, we have to work and stay focused on the other. But I thought I'd give you a language. You could just turn, now we look at each other and we go, We got it. Secondly, reciprocity. Normally we expect reciprocity in relationships. And in fact, if I don't get reciprocity from people, certainly in my friendships, I think so. I think reciprocity is absolutely critical. As I get older, quite frankly, it becomes even more critical. But Dale says, and I agree, we talked about this, you can't expect reciprocity. You might get frustrated, you might really spend a lot of energy on somebody, you might be full of caring and love and compassion. And she said, no expectations. It's a very Zen exercise that we need to teach ourselves all the time. But this issue of reciprocity, they're so ungrateful. No. Again, it's not about me. Last week, I said, no, how do you, I've asked her, because she calls me at night, she's in tears, and I had to, and I'm busy fundraising. And I said, how do you do it day after day? I asked Valerie as well. She says, you stay present. You just stay completely present. Take a deep breath, no matter how many, they're seeing 80 people a day on average. And she said, you have to practice your breathing and stay completely focused on, unfortunately says she can't get caught up in their stories. It's so overwhelming. Many of them are victims of torture and rape, and she got compassion fatigue, to say the least. She can only take in so much if she's going to be effective. So she sets some boundaries for herself. This is an interesting one. Do not ask about their story. It's not our business. I spent 5 years when I was working my PhD with Cancer Lifelines, telephone hotline for cancer. And one of our first lessons that we were trained, it's not your story, and you do not go get your story. We're hominarians. We like the story, right? We want closure. Oh, did your husband where'd you go? No, not your story. And so she says, and asking them, now some of us are in counseling, and that's part of it. But some of it, quite frankly, is a bit voyeuristic. And she says, we need to be aware of it. Most importantly, don't promise anything you can't deliver. If you can't deliver it, don't promise it, she said. These people have had a lot of failure, a lot of upsetness. And she said, and if you do promise something, she literally would say, I'll get back to you. Can you come here at 10 o'clock tomorrow? This is in the camps. Okay? You get back to them, you affirm whatever you have said you would do, whether it's to call somebody or contact somebody and so forth. I want to talk about language. Lazy tongue, I love it. Okay, so I teach in the United States, and I don't understand how 4 years how my students are. Seriously, they ask questions. My ESL students love this. When I say, I don't understand almost 40% of the questions that my American English-speaking native-born students ask me. And they're like, I don't know. I was like, articulate. And we don't realize we a very lazy tongue. Oh, come on, so I say, well, English, then to really, and, Tamara would have to tell me sometimes, by the way, it's so funny, because I over-articulate with my family. We are not teaching English as a second language, because it becomes, but I don't think you can over-articulate. I don't see as much mumbling. It's very interesting. I've been tuning here in Australia, but you do have a slight 70s twang. I've been trying to duplicate it, by the way. I have a strong Southern accent. I was born in the South. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I go Southern, but I try learning yours. I can't. I really can't, but very hard. Sometimes oh my God, and your slang. Can I just say, you need a dictionary of slang. It's rampant. Now, I don't get it, even in context, figuring out the cues, because we do figure out language within cues. You imagine if it's like for a person's second language. I have to say to Ian, speak English. No, I understand it's Aussie English. I think it's great, it's lively, it's interesting, but very difficult when you're working with other people. So lazy tongue. Learn to articulate, learn to slow down a little bit, and learn to complete sentences. Number 2, complex syntax, very difficult, the structure of a sentence. Oh, I love this one. Tag questions like, you aren't Laotian, are you? How difficult that is. Even sometimes I have to think. The referent was, you aren't Laotian, are you? Negative and positive, these kinds of things. Hypothetical questions, if then. If you were going to the store, what would you, a lot of cultures don't have an if then. They don't have a hypothetical. Okay, it's an imaginary state. So the hypothetical is difficult. Oh, I love this one. Convoluted syntax. Long, intertwined sentences. Okay, or digressions. I was in the store, and then, I stopped by my mother's, and, when I was there, this car came by. This kind of embedded stuff that's in sentences, very hard to follow. Sometimes I have trouble following. I'll tell you where the real problem comes. When the subject and the verb are so far apart. What was the referent? What are you talking about? My twin sister is great. My first work was on publishing a twin speech. We just call it it. It's so implied in twin speak. They say you have a hidden language. We have a very hyphenated language. Even today, her husband was a professor of English at Stanford. And he said, would you girls speak English? Because it was just the opposite. Instead of long intertwined, we just said it. You know how you have it with your sisters, or, the look? The look? Dinner time or something, the look? It's an abbreviated kind of language. But doesn't work well for people, A, that don't know you, or English is second language, and so forth. Idioms, local color. Well, you guys, you take the, oh my God, Aussie language. It's so colorful. But things like feeling blue, feeling down. I was teaching my students about falling in love, and they all got up and they started falling. They literally embraced the idiom. But all of these, like we use colors and up and down, feeling blue, feeling up, feeling down. These are all idioms. And it's hard not to speak without idioms, but be aware of them. Okay, because they're taken literally for people who are learning English as second language. Terminology, and this is hard for us. We all have specialized vocabulary. I have to work really hard to strip it from this PowerPoint. Watching the jargon and the terminology. And while I'm on this topic, I want to mention something. When you're working with interpreters, and you do have a specialized jargon, use cheat sheets. It really helps. If you know that the interpreter's coming in, it's a vocabulary, I want to talk about this. Anemia, as an example. Okay? It may not be translatable, not easy translation, depending on your interpreter's expertise, and it really helps to have a cheat sheet. In fact, I always tell people learning a second language to use cheat sheets as well. Humor, oh my God, humor, very difficult. Humor assumes a lot of baggage, a lot of cultural baggage. In the United States, a lot of our humor is based on sports, which I really could care less, quite frankly. And I don't get any of the baseball, football, whatever allusions that are in a lot of humor. Puns, obviously puns, which I love, but are very difficult. That kind of humor. Understatement or overstatement, regardless, very difficult. Sarcasm, one of my favorite forms. I have to be very careful, especially with my students. Actually, my English American born students. It's very difficult. Sarcasm is particularly problematic because the verbal and the nonverbal come in conflict. So if my twin walks out of the dressing room and I'll look at her dress, I'll say, oh, that's sweet. You know what I mean? Where the verbal and the nonverbal contradict. Where you see a lot of this kind of sarcasm and humor, and I see this all the time with parents parenting their children. Oh, John, you know you shouldn't beat the shit out of Sally. Now, what do you think the child is going to respond to? Right? You darling child of mine. And then meanwhile, you know, you're trying to send a teaching moment. So this is particularly problematic with sarcasm. I'm sorry, I have two things I'm working with. Language continuum. As I mentioned, it's the incongruent verbal and nonverbal messages, the source of a lot of humor, okay, and trying to emphasize. And I'll talk about this, especially with hand gestures and so forth. Tamara said a lot of people working the camps. Am I going too fast? Go, keep going. Hand gestures don't translate well. You know, they don't. They really are very more culture specific than we realize. So, and then trigger words. I don't know what the trigger words here are in Australia. Okay, I can tell you one thing. In the United States, it would be like ISIS. That would be a trigger word. Police, you know. But you really should think about identifying some trigger words in your work. Let's talk about the interaction itself, not just the language, but the actual interaction. I think it's impossible to really work with anybody, myself included, by the way, if you haven't established rapport and safety. Okay? My twin tends to be very efficient. She walks in the store, she said, I need this book. I said, wait, she lives in Mexico. I said, couldn't you just walk into a store and say hello? You know, in Hispanic culture, you always establish rapport. Hi. Oh, hi, really? And any of you working in Middle Eastern cultures, my first work was on Saudi Arabia, and said, hey, take 10 minutes to go through all this stuff, you know, the ritual. But then how do you ask somebody about their health and get task-oriented when you haven't even established a place of safety where people feel safe, kind of rapport with them? So I think it's absolutely critical to establish rapport and safety. When people say, I asked a physician assistant in the United States. Her name's Mara Adelman, too. Can you believe it? She lives in Napa. We've become good friends. And she's a twin. Amazing. She came over my house. I said, I want you to look at this PowerPoint. She went through it and she said, oh my God. She said, we need this at Clinic OA. She works at the Hispanic clinic in Napa. She says, we need this. And she said, about this establishment report, she says, I've only got 6 minutes. But in the 6 minutes that she has with the client, if she hasn't established rapport, especially with Hispanic culture, she ain't going to get anywhere, to be candid. And she knows this. So one of the things we talked about, this was interesting, she says, but why couldn't I use my physician assistant? She has an assistant. And to set up the rapport. Anybody in admin, any of you don't realize how you set the tone as soon as somebody comes up to the reception table, And then why is that time, do you have people who take the blood pressure and take the intake before they go into the doctor's office, or somebody who does a preliminary? We have that a lot. You rarely just pop into the doctor's office. You have the blood pressure, your weight, and all this other stuff. But that person's really critical. Their role is not to be underestimated in setting up a rapport, setting up a feeling of safety. And by the way, you're going to see, Dr. Adelman, and she's really fun, and she's really confident. I mean, she sets up, and she loves Mexico. Oh, you're from Guadalajara? Oh, what a beautiful city. Even if you've never been there, it's beautiful, right? And I'll talk about learning their culture. Valerie in the camps. And I think these camps are a real extreme situation. If they can do things there, we could probably try and do them here. One of the things, she always introduces herself. Hi, I'm Valerie. And, then she goes on. She always asks the other person's name and country. And if they're from Bangladesh, she knows the capital, she'll say, oh, your country, the capital, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes on. And people are just like, oh. People love their country. It's been torn asunder. And so she just finds a little repartee that very, very much breaks the ice, not to be underestimated. And then she always asks, how can I help you? And she always asks permission before she does anything. Before she takes a blood pressure, May I take your pulse? May I take your blood pressure? She always asks. And I thought, excuse me, keep going, and taking the blood pressure and asking, yes, we know that the source of self-efficacy, feeling that you have control, is the ability to give choice. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. I give my students a false choice. I build in a false deadline for all their papers, because I don't want to hear about their grandmother getting run over, okay? So I'll say it's due next week, but you have an option to extend it. It's a false deadline, to be honest. You have an option to extend it 1 week, and after that, I don't want to hear it. And you know what? Ever since I've done that, I don't hear any complaints. But what have I done? What have I done for these students with this false deadline stuff? By the way, I share this with all professors and they love it, okay? I've given them a choice. It could be that day, but if you take the choice to extend it, okay? And when we ask permission, we say, may I have permission? Okay, we've given a choice. So it increases the sense of self-efficacy, that they have some control. In a state of fright and fear, in trauma, you have to repeat, okay? You have to say it many times, and some of us get frustrated. Taylor said sometimes you have to say it 5 or 6 times. Find a different way, a shorter way, and use your translator. Especially in healthcare, okay? In taking medications, you have to show it, you have to speak it, you have to write it. We know that in learning, when there's more senses involved, seeing, hearing, even tasting, moving, we know there's more senses involved. A, the greater we can retain the information, because we're actively involved in learning it. And B, we're more likely to learn it. Okay, because one of our senses will pick up the cues. We all know that we're different kinds. Like I'm a visual learner. I don't learn. I'm not an oral learner. I wish I was, but I'm not. But some people are oral learners. They don't need all the visuals. Some people, especially young children, are kinesthetic learners. They have to be moving to learn. And that's why I actually try to use all my senses when I'm teaching as well. Now this last one sounds weird, serving tea. And Valor's saying they always try to serve a ginger tea. And for some people, when they come to the clinic, it's the first warm thing they've had. It's freezing cold. And I thought to myself, if they could serve tea in those conditions, what could we do? And the reason I say about tea, many of you who have been abroad, you know that you always serve tea first. I mean, you wouldn't start a conversation unless you had tea, but it breaks the ice. Your assistant could use it, somebody out in triage could do it. It might be water, okay, that you serve. But I thought, oh, that's interesting. You guys really make an effort to start that rapport. Okay, interpreter concern. You always ask, oh, it's on there. Okay, I have a slightly different one here. Really good and not so good interpreters, we know that. We know that if we said something for like 2 minutes and they spoke for 5 seconds, there's probably an interpretation issue, okay? And you know that. Providing privacy. The last group that I talked with said this was very helpful to them. I was a little surprised. You have an interpreter there. Not exactly the most private situation. In the cares, especially during anything physical, the interpreter's behind a curtain. That's number 1. 2, if somebody walks into the room, that's a privacy issue. You don't just go to business as usual, keep going on, and so nobody walked into the room. The person's introduced. Is it okay? So-and-so stays. Of course, usually they'll say yes, but at least you ask permission. But you just don't treat this as an open, unconfident. Well, I wouldn't tolerate it, to be honest, as a patient. Why should they? And somebody actually in the last class said that was very useful to them. We get very task-oriented and we forget about things like privacy. No medical work without an interpreter. That's a rule in the camps. They don't do anything. Initial complaints. It's always an issue, and I'm sure some of you have experienced this. The initial complaint is not the problem. They come with the initial complaint, which may well mask the key problem. It could be because it's sexual, it involves our husband, who knows, okay? But frequently the initial complaint, and so they have to kind of make sure, and that's why she said, is there anything else you would like to share? Okay. And then, what do I have? Cheat sheets, I mentioned that. Difficult terms, particularly for the interpreter. Translator, many of you probably are using phone translation and translator apps. You might well teach your clients how to use them as well. There's lots. She hasn't found one for Farsi. I don't know if there is one, but there is for Arabic and French. They use them a lot in the camps. Interpreter works best if you use them on a regular basis. They try to use, because they get to know your style. Okay? And there's an art to interpretation, as we well know. So it helps if you can use a regular translator in your work. Cultural issues. First of all, it doesn't take a lot, especially in the age of the internet, to get some basic information about these cultures. Just even basic stuff. Get to know some of the cultures. You know how to say hello now. Hey, whatever. I mean, this is not pushing the boundaries, I don't think, many of us here. But it really helps to know a little bit about, and certainly, by the way, geography. Big payoff. Now, my students are geographically illiterate. I had to teach, one day I had to devote to geography. I was shocked. You know, Bangladesh, the capital of Paris. Okay, you know, this is the stuff I would get. We're very illiterate, by the way, at many levels, excuse me, but the geography, real challenge. But try to learn where are boundaries? Who boundaries on who? Where do they escape from if they talk about those things? Taboo topics, very critical. I cannot. Now, what's the number one taboo? Anybody? Oh, come on. Number one taboo, period.
Issues regarding female body functions.
Yeah, what body function? Particular?
Menstruation.
Yeah, anything dealing with sexuality, genitalia, blah, 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 blah. Sex is a big taboo. And especially when there's, STDs, especially around sexual violence, and rape. And a lot of women in particular, as we all know, I don't think I need to tell this audience, but they are taboo, and how they're dealt with. Like so often the male is present when females, that's an issue. And how do you think through how you're going to work with taboo topics. Touch, the most highly charged area of nonverbal communication. By the way, I just want to say about taboo, in the United States, somebody read a book, I think it's very true, that money is more taboo than sex. You can't ask somebody what they make. But you could ask about their sex life. But since I wrote about sex, guess what's more taboo than their sex life? How they talk about sex. The discourse of intercourse is much more taboo than the intercourse itself. Very interesting. So what becomes taboo is not always self-evident. Touch, very challenged. I had a student fall asleep in my class once. I had speakers, and she puts her hand. I went over to shake her. A week later, I had a lawsuit against her. Almost left academia. Very charged, especially now in the era of Me Too and so forth. I mean, there's like 10 different ways you can touch somebody's shoulder and mean 10 different things. Highly charged. Hand gestures, as I mentioned, don't translate well. By the way, raising voices. This is, when we get to those albums, we hear a lot of people, our chords tend to tighten, and our voices get stronger, and they get more strident, and they get higher. Okay? I lived in Ethiopia for several months. And I have to tell you, I was just shocked. Ethiopians are very soft-spoken. It's a very soft-spoken culture. In fact, I had to work with diplomats to get them to raise their volume. I was embarrassed. They would talk. Large audiences, they're very soft-spoken. I never heard anybody raise their voice. I lived in China and twice for a couple of years. And, okay, I'm Jewish. We have to kvetch. You have to complain. It's very cathartic. I feel so much better when I kvetch. When I complain, I let it all out, And here I was in my room. I have a nice room in Shanghai. It's got heating. It's got lighting, electricity. I have air conditioning. And I'm complaining. And they live in the hallways. They cook in these filthy conditions. And there were all these teachers there. And they were looking at me while I was going on some rant about my hot water. And I looked at them and said, don't you guys ever complain? And they looked at me and they said, no, because it's not things they have control over. I was like, oh my God, it's humiliating. Anyway, I learned a lesson. But understanding how we use our tone of voice. Social rituals. It always pays to learn a few social rituals and just simply to understand the role of social rituals. These are not just rituals. They set an important path. We have our rituals too. It's very interesting. We always ask people, what do you do? Why do we ask that question? Because we're trying to reduce uncertainty, put people in a box, but we're also deciding, do I want to continue talking to you? Will you be of interest to me? What's going on here? What's your demographic? Oh, education and so forth. I never ask those questions. I always ask questions like, what floats your boat? You know, what's your cream in the coffee? You know, I want to know what people's passions are. Oh my God, the conversation goes in a whole other direction. Only because I find traditional American social rituals so deadening. Oh, what do you do? Where do you live? Basically, how much money do you make? You know, there are subtext. You got it. Anyway, social rituals. And that's what I want to mention just here on cultural authenticity. You know, when I was living in Japan, the Japanese would always laugh at the Americans who bowed lower than they were, or the Chinese would, you know, telling people more Chinese than they were. You know, the tourists are trying so hard to be Chinese, so hard to be authentic. And you know, I once asked my Chinese friends, oh my God, I'm such a mess. I'm always, you know, blowing up. And you have me as your good friend. I mean, what is that about? And they said, oh, Mark, we always knew who you were. Let's not forget the element of authenticity, because we bring that. If you notice my title page, Samar, then it says ex-bartender, because that's part of my training. In fact, it's my best training. I'd say bartending par excellent in communication. And I think that we forget that we bring all of this together. And I really do believe that for all those cultural differences that I profess to teach, I think people recognize authenticity. I think they recognize genuine caring. I think they recognize compassion. So don't forget, in all of these cultural differences that we emphasize, don't forget your authenticity, your essence. Okay, and lastly, let me conclude here. Here's some emerging, what did I do? Okay, emerging work. My sister's getting trained here. She's a yoga teacher. They don't call it yoga, by the way, and they don't call it meditation in the camps. They call it movement and breathing. That's a big issue, by the way, in the university where they're teaching meditation stuff. Forget it. Call it breathing, de-woo it, okay? Is that a word, de-woo? Okay. There's a new area, and I've got some citations for you on movement for trauma, which is just an emerging area, and breathing exercises for trauma, which I think is, and she's working with that in the camps, because you can work, how many people deal with the moment with the work that they're doing? Becoming advocates. I know we all work 9 to 5 jobs and busy, and we don't want to take our work off, but the truth is, we are our work. You know, we are our work. And you have the rare opportunity, all of you, to make the invisible visible by virtue of your work. Now, you don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I believe that every time we start a conversation about refugees, we're making the visible, visible, invisible, visible. That's a mouthful. And we do that with conversations. Next step, I'll send some material to you. Keeping friends. We have displaced dinners in the United States where we serve soup and we just bring people over. They can talk about your flowers, your keychains, whatever. And getting political. And every conversation, I really believe every conversation makes a difference. I'm sorry, I had trouble reading. Yep, okay, conclusion. Well, you're the conclusion. I'd like you to take a minute, and we could go to Q&A, but I'd like to ask you to take a minute to write down something that you have found useful in your work in communicating with refugees. I know that I will type these up. Don't want an autobiography, just a sentence or two. What you have found useful, or perhaps what you heard today that might be useful for your colleagues on the back of a card. What do you find? What strategy, idea, or resource you find effective? And leave them on the table, and I will pick them up and take them home and embrace them. Everything is sent to you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Just write one thing you found useful, effective, helpful, something for you that you could share with your colleagues. And I'm really respectful of time. If you need to go, I understand, but you leave your cards here, that'd be great. You're welcome to buy a flower on your way out. Okay, what I'd like to do, if you could, we take 2 minutes. I know it's a short time, and it's abbreviated, I want to respect the time. Could we take a couple minutes in your group just to share that one idea that you have? Take it just a couple minutes.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Just feel free to leave your cards.
Even here. Offering choices, thinking about genuinely offering, not just offering an extension that yes over time, just to make sure that
I've had to go through the motions, like, how you get to do these. No, it's like, it's not, am I really giving them a choice, am I really just trying to get them to the answer that I want them to give me, so I can go ahead and do what I need to do
Okay, I know some of you have to go, and I'm respectful of time. I will type all these up. Are there any questions? Probably have to open it up to a larger room, and they're willing to answer work-specific questions. By the way, I don't work in the area of trauma. I was asked to talk about that, but I think that goes beyond an internet search for me. So I refrained, but I said to Kali and Monica, I said, I really think a follow-up on just trauma itself would be very useful, because that's a particularly complex, as we know, something to work with. That goes beyond. Any questions? Oh, feel free to get up. No problem. Yes, ma'am.
How do you honor their stories and their experience without crossing the line into patronizing?
Yeah. I think it's possible, to be honest, to get too self-conscious. I don't know about you, but I rarely meet somebody who's interested in my story. In fact, can I just say something? In my analysis, I had to take a year of conversational analysis where you analyze interactions and pause and talk about them. Do you know that very few conversations go to the third or fourth question? Think about a conversation you had where you had somebody who wouldn't be on the first question. Like people say, oh, what do you teach, Mara? I said, oh, communication. Oh, great, move on. Oh, I specialize in solitude, which is my last area. My research always reflects my social life. And I teach a course on solitude. You think that would grab some attention, Elise? And no, I really rarely go. I mean, I rarely get anybody. If I do, I'm just shocked. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be glib about it, but I think you'll know when you're being intrusive. I think we know when we're asking the questions if we're being intrusive. Okay? And I also think it's, again, a case where you give permission. You ask permission. I'm really big on asking permission. I wanted to ask you about your home now. Would that be all right? Or your journey here. But I understand if it's not comfortable for you. Let them make a choice. Any other questions? Or yes, ma'am.
Oh, Mara, this is not a question, but just thanking you for re-inspiring me to do my work. Because sometimes I think when you have done your work with, and by the way, I'm from the refugee
health service.
Uh-huh.
And when you have done it for a long, long time, and there are so many things that you cannot do because of all of the bureaucratic things, and you sort of lose a bit of interest because you are always thinking about the challenges rather than the possibilities. So I think thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, and this is very worthwhile for me to be here. And I'm really very inspired to share whatever I learned from you today.
Please.
With my colleagues.
Thank you for that. I'm really grateful because you can't imagine how anxious I was when they asked me to communicate with refugees. I didn't communicate with refugees. I mean, that's a